Hello, everyone. It's Francis Widdowson here. I am very pleased to have a guest on today who I'm going to be interviewing with respect to having some of this information incorporated into a documentary that I'm currently working on regarding the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act, which came into law in Alberta in 2024. For people who are unaware of my situation, I was involved as a professor at Mount Royal University, and trans activism was one of those issues that we could not discuss openly and honestly at Mount Royal University without consequences. And I think that is having a very negative effect on our ability to understand some of the challenges that trans activism poses for a variety of policies. And one of them is the fairness and safety in sport with respect to the female category in women's sport. So I would really like to welcome April Hutchinson to this interview. We've been trying to get together now for a couple of months, so I'm really glad that it's finally happened. So thank you so much, April, for agreeing to be interviewed for this documentary.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
So I think before we begin with any of the questions that I wanted to ask, it might be a good idea for you just to explain in your own words what who you are and what happened to you. I know there's a serious controversy that occurred with respect to your participation in female powerlifting, but you might want to give some background as to how you got into powerlifting and then what happened to you which created this controversy.
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually a former three-time Team Canada powerlifter. I got into powerlifting kind of by fluke, actually. I was always an athlete growing up. I was always into sports of all kinds. And I got into powerlifting in 2019 as a way to keep fit and to keep healthy, as a way to keep sober, because I was actually a lifelong alcoholic. Even though I still played sports, I struggled with alcoholism. So in 2019, I checked myself into rehab to get treatment for alcoholism. And when I came out, I thought, hey, I'm going to get into powerlifting for some odd reason. So I found a coach, actually did very well in powerlifting. And it was right before COVID had hit. So I actually had to train in my friend's garage, of all things, because there was no gyms open. And during that time training in my friend's gym, I had Facebook as a means to keep in touch with people and meet people in the powerlifting community. And during that time, I met a individual by the name of Anne, and I discovered that Anne, who had been powerlifting for a couple of years, confided in me, and Anne was actually portraying himself as a woman in our conversations, and also was taking gold medals in the women's category. But during our conversations on Facebook, confided in me and stated that he was in fact a male, was born a male. And so I asked him and said, well, how long do you plan to keep competing, and how far do you wish to go in powerlifting? And Anne replied, well, I want to go as far as I can. I would like to go to nationals. I would like to go to worlds. And I said to Anne, well, if you do that, I'm going to speak up. I think that's completely unfair. And you're taking podium spots and medals away from women. And at this time, I hadn't even competed in my first competition. I had no idea when that time would be, because it was still COVID at that time. And so I sat with that for a while. I didn't say anything to anyone. I kind of slept on it for about a week. And so I went to social media and I started posting things on Instagram like save women's sports, keep men out of women's sports, because at that time, Laura Hubbard was going to the Olympics. And that's when it kind of first started surfacing, and it was grabbing people's attention. And I also noticed that Riley Gaines was competing against Leah Thomas. So I was using those slogans like save women's sports. And my federation actually noticed that I was posting slogans like that, and actually said, well, April, you can't say stuff like that, and gave me a written warning saying that that's hate speech. You can't say that. So I didn't even use Anne's name. I didn't even mention the person's name. I kept it confidential. So then a week after that, I actually wrote them like a 2-page letter telling them about Anne and how Anne had confided in me about being a male. And I wrote a very respectful letter stating the dangers of competing against men, both physically and mentally, stating that, it's hard to compete against, like, it's like, just the overtraining, the mental strain, like the always having to do better, and like all these other things. And they actually didn't even respond to my letter. They ignored me. So I actually reached out to icons in the States, Marshy Smith. I reached out to Riley Gaines. And then I found, God bless, God bless Linda Blade. I found Linda Blade in Canada because I actually thought I was all alone in Canada. She and ICFS in Canada helped me, and we actually wrote the Federation a very formal letter stating how unfair it was, and they actually assisted me. But I continued to speak up, and then basically when Anne went to regionals and took 3 out of the 5 records for powerlifting in the women's category, I went on Pierce Morgan and I stated that Anne took the records, and I referred to Anne as a man on television, and I was slapped with a 2-year suspension for calling Anne a biological male on TV. And I guess the rest is history. I fought it. I got a human rights lawyer, Lisa Bildy. She's a great, wonderful lawyer. And I got my sentence reduced to a year, my suspension. But ever since then, I've just been an advocate fighting for fairness. And that was about 3 years ago. And I've just been, speaking up with Riley Gaines. I've had my policy changed in powerlifting. The international policy has been changed to testosterone monitoring, and that any trans individual has to now submit medical records, which is actually a big deal because a lot of males going in are just grifters. They're just going in trying to get prize money, trying to dominate. But now they actually have to submit medical records stating that they have gender dysphoria, or they have these certain, psychological, cases. And but at a local level, nothing changed. And that's why I'm not going back to my sport, because I refuse to watch any females lose to males. Doesn't matter if you're 5 years old, or if you're 10 years old, or if you're 20. I just refuse to go back to that. So, and then obviously we have the legislation that happened in Alberta. So there's been some wonderful things that have happened since I've used my voice. So.
Okay. So just a few clarifying things. You mentioned an organization. You used initialism to refer to it. It started with I, which is associated with Linda Blade. What is that organization?
So I have to look. It's ICFS.
ICFS?
Yeah, ICFS. I'm just going to Google it here. ICFS.
I assume I guess it wouldn't be international because it's Canadian. It's a Canadian organization.
No, it's Canadian. I call it like the hang on, I'm gonna find it here. Oh, International Consortium on Female Sport.
Okay. And
yes.
Okay, so that's a good organization and they defend women who are trying to maintain the female category in their sport.
Yes. So it's International Campaign Group advocating for sports to have a dedicated category for athletes born female. Okay. Now, I don't know how many members across Canada there are. And I don't know specifically if it was like Linda Blade that specifically started it. But if you go to their website, which is icfssport.org, or you can simply just reach out to Linda Blade. Okay. I'm not a member of it myself, but they basically wrote a letter to my federation. It was it was a very nice formal letter, but it was ignored, and I couldn't actually believe it because
Yes.
but yeah, I went to Icons first, which is, obviously a great organization that helps obviously more like the American side of things and the sports, but they did help me too. They were actually the first group that helped me, and they actually funded money to help me get a lawyer. So did Rebel News here in Canada.
Yep.
Like the help was overwhelming. So like when they found out that I was going to get suspended and that, I was speaking out, I mean, it was just an overwhelming response. I've had nothing but support.
Okay.
And to be honest, Francis, I say this all the time because I think a lot of people are like, oh, you must get so much hate. Like, besides getting suspended, I see all the hate mail and all this stuff that, Riley Gaines and all these athletes get. It's very different for me. I haven't got like a lot of hate messages. I've had trans activists go after me for sure, but it's only a handful. Those loud ones that just, they've gone after my job. They've tried to get me fired. They got my museum exhibit taken down, but it's only a handful of very loud, wicked ones, right? But I don't get a lot of mean messages in my mailbox or blah, 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 all that stuff. I've had overwhelming support. Like every day, like today I went out, I got recognized at Shoppers Drug Mart. Thank you so much for doing everything you do. I wear this everywhere I go. And it's like, I love it. It's great. The suspension was a blessing, to be honest. So,
but you were still suspended for a year instead of not being suspended.
Yes.
So how do you feel about that? Like that punishment for just speaking out about an injustice that you believe was being done to you?
Oh, like, I mean, so when I got suspended for the 2 years, like when I saw that email come through and it's like, you're suspended, I didn't cry. I was like shocked because a 2-year suspension is something you would give to an athlete that got caught for doping.
Mm-hmm.
It was unbelievable. I was just shocked. And I was just like, whatever, give it to me again. Give it to me again and again and again. I really don't care because that's pathetic. This board that gave it to me, remember, this is a private organization. So the board members is kind of like the Amy Ham case. Like it's a board.
Okay, so it's a ethics, some kind of ethical conduct kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a board of members, like the one female, she has a queer trans child that's in the federation. The president, I have a screenshot of one of his text message that he said, you know what, it's just easier for us to be quiet because we'll lose funding. Like he agrees with me, but it was like, oh, it's easier for us just to punish April than to actually, say something. It's like the woke, go broke. It's like even like, I think if this whole thing happened now instead of 3 years ago, they would have, I bet they really regret their decision. Like I bet, it was kind of like the thing to do 3 years ago. It was like, oh, we got to go with the flow. Even like when I wanted to sue them, my lawyer's like, no, the courts are so woke right now. Yeah. They're so captured by this ideology. Why are we going to waste our money? It's, but if we sued now, like it's a different story. So, it's just like this whole trans thing. Like everyone's trans. It's just like, oh, I don't feel good today in my own skin. I'm trans. Like that's just the way it is.
Yes.
So,
and in terms of the changes that were made in, I assume Canada, so this is the Canadian context.
Yes.
They still allow males to compete
at a local level.
At a local level, but not at the national level.
Well, so they do let males compete, but it's way more strict now. So as far as I'm concerned right now, or what I know of, is that there's no males competing at a national level because, sorry, my cat. So Anne, who was trying to compete at a national level, couldn't go through because Anne could not produce medical records.
Okay.
So they could try to compete at a national level, but they're going to have to go through the testosterone monitoring. So they have to be monitored like a year prior and then continuously monitored and then they also have to provide medical records. So far, none of them have been able to provide that. So they could go for it.
Are they required to lower their testosterone?
Yeah, it has to be 2.4 or lower.
2.4 nanomoles or whatever. I've looked at that. Yes.
Yeah.
And is that the highest female in the female range? I was doing some research on this, and I'm not sure if you know this. This is a little bit more of a scientific question, because there's a lot of discussion about the role that testosterone plays in the male advantage. And there's testosterone and there's other issues. Do you have a sense of how much testosterone, of a role testosterone plays? And is the 2.4 number, is that sort of the high range for women?
I'm not a believer in the testosterone. I think that's a horrible, I think it's either you're born male or female. I think that's just the way it is. And for someone, for example, Anne went through full blown puberty. So Anne is a 6 foot, full grown male. Went through. He transitioned after. So, me, I actually went because I did very well in powerlifting. Like I said, I've always been an athlete. I started at age 5 into athletics. So as you know, when you're younger, if you start running at a younger age, you're going to grow a bigger rib cage because of your breathing, because your lungs are going to grow bigger, right? You're just going to be built that way. So for me, I actually went and got my testosterone tested on purpose, because I was like, wow, I'm so strong. Like I must be I probably have more testosterone than the average. I actually have below average for a female. So there you go. So no, I think, and I mean, even Linda Blade will concur with me that testosterone monitoring is like really crappy. That should go out the window. It should just be XX competes against XX, XY against XY.
Yes.
There should be no other. I mean, God bless the International Powerlifting Federation for actually changing their policy, because they did, because I used my voice. I went to the president and I said, you need to change it. You cannot have men going through to worlds and to nationals. And they actually changed it. So they tweaked it, which was great. The president actually did say, I do not want men going through. He was on my side. So he did change it as much as he could, as much as the board could at that time. I'm sure they want to have it just men against men, women against women. But I mean, I know they want to make further changes.
But that's the international organization. Is that
yes,
is testosterone still part of the way they're dealing with this situation?
Yeah. So the International Powerlifting Federation, their policy is testosterone monitoring and medical records.
Okay.
I know that they want to be on board with the Olympic, like they want to do actually probably sex testing and all that, but because they actually want to make it to the Olympics. Like right now it's just worlds, but they want to make it to the Olympics someday. So they want to be as strict as anything. But the federation that actually suspended me, which is the Canadian Powerlifting Union, they have nothing. They actually made a trans inclusion policy so they can accommodate transgenders. You know, they actually put like suggested pronoun usage in their policy. Like you have to use pronouns when you're at competitions. Like it's just, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. This is who I was going up against, this board of 5 people who even on their Instagram account, you know, they have them saying like, we support trans lifters. And like, it was a very woke kind of type of board that I was dealing with. So,
and sorry, what is the name of that board again?
Canadian Powerlifting Union.
Canadian Powerlifting Union. Okay. Because as you know now as well, it's not just the transgender issue. It is what's called disorders of sexual development, as we saw with two cases that I'm aware of, which is Caster Semenya, who was a sprinter, and Imani Khalif, who was a boxer. And Khalif, especially because of the boxing and the danger, the safety issues. Yes. Is there anything about the intersex condition, or is that going to be falling under the testosterone? Sorry, I don't like using the term intersex. I've been trapped into this. This is an example of how
Yeah.
words are used, because it's not about like some sex that's in between male and female. It's about a disorder of sexual development on the male or the female side.
Well, to me, I mean, I had a very interesting conversation with as an evolutionary biologist when I was out in Nashville. And I mean, I don't get trapped into the whole DSD conversations either. I mean, a man Khalif is a male. He was born male. We're talking about a chromosomal disorder, and so I was always told. I mean, when people throw that conversation onto me, it's just a conversation of distraction.
Mm.
You're born either male or female, so I mean, here we go again. We're going to have the cheek swab tests introduced, and this is going to take care of everything. So, thank God for world athletics, and hopefully with the Olympics, right? So, from what I know, there's like I haven't heard of any DSD in the powerlifting, but again, I don't really like to entertain that question. Again, it goes down to you're either male or female.
Yes.
It's a chromosomal disorder, and you can go down a rabbit hole with that with people online who are not educated about the subject. You know, I try not to knock my brain with people with that question. You know, I think Linda Blade is probably the best person to talk about that, but she's always the one that's actually told me, don't get distracted by that question, April.
Yeah. It seems to me to be a very, like, I think with the testosterone controls, that seems to be missing a major part of the conversation, which is, as you mentioned, people who go through puberty and have the testosterone having an influence on various strength and endurance types of variables in the human body. That seems to be an issue that's not really addressed by having testosterone controls. What's your view on that?
Well, I mean, that's more of a complex question, I think, for me. Like, I don't even know if I'm the type of person that to kind of answer that question. I think that'd be more of a question for probably for Linda Blade, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're relatively satisfied with
the
existing situation, because you think it removes most of the people who are just trying to insert themselves into it for financial or gain, or becoming a celebrity or what have you, like Lauren Hubbard, right? So someone like you mentioned, Lauren Hubbard, who I believe is the New Zealand weightlifter.
Powerlifter.
Yeah.
I mean, I will be completely happy when it's literally cheek swab tests across the board.
Yes. And it's not difficult to do, I've heard.
No, it's not difficult to do. It's not evasive. It's just like, it's funny how they're like, oh, it's like horrible. Like, no, it's just so funny how people think, oh, well, it goes against that's why like this powerlifter was like, well, I'm not submitting medical records. It goes against my human rights and all this. I'm like, okay, well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You've made that decision to because you want to become the opposite sex and all this. There's consequences to everything you do in life. It's like you're going to go get a driver's license. Guess what? There's consequences. When you decide to pick up a sport, whether it's house league or it's this and that, there's consequences. There's responsibilities to everything you do. For example, when I joined powerlifting, I knew that there was going to be a fee. I have to pay a fee. There's going to have to be equipment that I'm going to have to pay for. And guess what? I am subjected to surprise drug testing, random drug testing. I also got tested at Worlds. I got whisked off stage and I had to go take a urine test. So someone had to sit there and watch me pee in a cup. So what's worse? So, I mean, a cheek swab test or peeing in front of someone. So, I mean, yeah. So, and then sometimes you have to take blood panels depending on what level they want to go to. So,
yes. Yes. So there's two major issues that you've identified. The kind of lost opportunities. So people losing
Mm.
out on medals, which I believe there is a website that is kind of documenting this, the numbers of I think it's called She Won, which is documenting all the medals that have been lost by female
Yeah.
athletes. And the second one is the safety, the matter of
Yeah.
safety, which you see in especially boxing. But as you mentioned, it can have safety consequences for women who feel that they have to overtrain to try to keep up to
Yes.
an
So
unfair situation. Is there other issues that you have found with respect to uh, males, people born male, competing in sports, in female sports?
So there's a couple of things. So that, yeah, so there's shewon.org, and then there's also hecheated.org. There's
Yeah.
that one too, which is a good one. Now, my letter that I wrote, so I don't know if people know my story, but what's happening is that these organizations, these institutions, what have you, they're bending over backwards to appease the mental health of these males. I'll call them narcissistic males, and they're forgetting about the mental health of female athletes. So I'll go back to the beginning of when I told people that I use the sport to help me stay sober. So I've used this sport to help me with my mental health. I know
Mhm.
tons of, I actually did a video about this, but even Linda Blade used sports to help her with her mental health. And I know a basketball player that was on the streets, sex traffickers that used basketball, other sports to stay off the streets, to stay off drugs. We all have mental health problems. So why are these men, why are we bending over backwards for these men? We all use sports. Everyone deserves to play sports, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so when I wrote this letter, I said, like, besides the combat sports and the overtraining that we saw Peyton McNabb that got smashed in the face by a volleyball, all these other athletes that have been harmed. We have the MMA girl that got her skull split open. But the mental anguish of the overtraining, people have to remember that a lot of these high level athletes also suffer. Like, I know myself, I suffer from OCD. To be number one athlete, to be a high level athlete, you have to be obsessed. And that means training almost 24/7. It's a lifestyle. So you're constantly pushing yourself to be number one. And a lot of these Olympic athletes are very suicidal. Like, they have depression. And if they don't get to be that podium, like, I forget who that one Olympic athlete was that actually, I don't know if he committed suicide, but they do get suicidal, and they take it really to the next level of, like, hardship when they don't get that podium spot.
Mm.
And so imagine training and training and training and just never getting that podium spot and just always losing and never getting that gold medal. And then you're losing sponsorships, you're
Yeah.
losing medals, just always setting yourself up for failure. So I'm not talking just the physical harms, it's the mental harms as well. Also, these athletes that are in tested federations, imagine the toying with your head of saying, like, oh, you know what? Should I cheat? Should I take those PEDs? Should I take those a performance? Or maybe just that one time. Imagine the back and forth in your head just to
Mm.
get that podium spot. I'm just saying these little things that go in your head, right? So
Mhm.
there's a lot of these little, yeah, I mean, obviously the prize money and just like the things like that. But so when I wrote my letter, it was a lot to do with the mental stuff, not just the physical, because the physical is the obvious, right? So
Yeah. And I was listening to Riley Gaines, an interview with Riley Gaines about Leah Thomas's impact on. There's a few things that she mentioned about the impacts, and one of them was just being able to qualify for. And there was a woman
Mhm.
from somewhere in Eastern Europe, had a quite a tragic story, came to the United States to uh, compete. I'm not sure if she was on a scholarship or what have you, but she was, I think, number 17. Like, there's 16 selected, to go to whatever meets, the nationals or whatever it was. Because of Riley Gaines, she was knocked out. She couldn't go because of she was number 17, and Riley Gaines, by taking a spot, took that spot. So it's not even just the high level people that we think about. There's all sorts of selection processes all the way
Yeah,
down that are impacted by the one person who, or more than one,
exactly.
however many people that are doing this. The second thing that Riley Gaines mentioned was the change room issue. Did that
I
come
was
up?
just going to say that. I was just going to say, not only is it the sport itself, but it's actually having to share your spaces. And that's why I say this on my sweatshirt. I have the spaces. I don't know if you can see that.
If they can.
But it's a major thing. I'm also a survivor of sexual abuse. So that's why I'm, not my campaign or what I stand for is not just about let's keep men out of women's sports. Let's keep them out of our spaces. And that goes for washrooms and locker rooms, because I can remember the first time that I walked in and I saw a man in my washroom, and my post-traumatic stress, the hair on my back just stood right up. And wow, I was drenched in sweat. No. And I tell you, I'm a big girl. So you imagine how my little 6-year-old niece, like if she was ever in the bathroom with a male, but I mean, we shouldn't have to go through that, right? But it's unsafe, and it should not be allowed. And yeah. So I can't even, I can't believe that Riley and all her teammates had to go through all of that. I personally didn't have to share my space with Anne. I know other people that have. So, but I mean,
But that
personally,
was something, the body that regulates all of this, were they basically telling the women that, like they did with Riley Gaines, that was what they were going to have to do, and if you complained
yeah.
about it, you were advised to go seek some kind of counseling yourself, but it was just a non-starter to complain about that situation. Is that what happened
Oh,
in this case,
well,
or is there something different?
people in my federation, like no one has been really outspoken except for me. There was a couple powerlifters that have used their voice, but no one particularly has said anything about the spaces. But basically, it would be if someone did make any comments, they would probably be told just to go use the single stall, or like the family restroom or something like that. We would be told to leave. It would be our issue to
Okay.
leave.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's what it's like, Francis, that's what it's like in Canada in general. We're the ones that get told, like, oh, you're a transphobic, or you're the one doing the wrong thing. Like, keep them. We have to make them comfortable. So yeah.
Yes. Discrimination. Just wanted to ask you a little bit about this. So this is just going over the footage and so on from the Alberta legislature in these discussions. It gets brought up. This is one of the major kinds of arguments that is made, that it's a human rights issue, that it's discriminatory not to include. It's not inclusive. It's discrimination, etc. What is your reaction to that type of argument that is being made?
Well, the thing is, I think so. In the first place, it's always been discrimination against women to take, like, basically to force us to compete against males. And it's been discrimination against women to take our washroom away, okay? And to force us to share it with men. And that's what's been happening here in Canada. Very little have I seen them. Like, there's been a couple places here in London where they've had men's, women's, and universal. And I like that concept because, you still have, or even, I wish that, and this is what Alberta has done, is that they've created a female only category, the male only category, and a co-ed, which is beautiful, because I stand behind this, because the key component of all of this is that the female only category is protected. And this is what we wanted all along. Now, the co-ed is beautiful because it's much like the open, which has been a thing forever and ever. And that way, if there's women, because we know, Frances, there's a lot of women out there that love to support trans-identifying individuals. Because I'll tell you, women have been my biggest enemy in this fight. that they can go into the co-ed and go and support the trans-identifying individual in that co-ed category. I know it's sad, but yes, they can go into that co-ed category and support.
Yes.
And so that's all we ever wanted. But it's not discrimination when we actually have given you two categories. But it is discrimination when you actually beforehand have actually taken away the women's and actually have forced us to compete against a stronger sex. And so that's what discrimination is. So I'm very confused how they think it's discrimination. Are you confused about this, Frances? Because I'm kind of confused why they say that.
I think my own, just listening to the arguments about it, it's because of the I think it's because the definition of the word woman. So if you put forward the argument that trans women are women, which, believe you me, being in the university system, and this is going to be a big part of my documentary, is that there's really two major claims that are made that are behind all of this. One is that trans women are women, and the second is that trans rights are human rights. Those are the two most fundamental claims that are made.
What rights do they not have? I'm confused. What rights? Trans can still access jobs, medical care, all these other things. They can still play sports, but what rights do they not have, which I'm quite concerned about? So they've always had rights.
Yes, well, they're in terms of the trans women, if you're going to accept that trans women are women and you don't allow them to be in the women's spaces and women's categories and so on, the argument is that it's discriminating against them on the basis of them being women and not being allowed to be in the women's categories and spaces.
What's the definition of a woman?
For them, see, this is where they would start to have difficulties, because their definition is anyone who identifies as a woman, which, as you know, many people, probably yourself as well, has pointed out, this is a circular definition. Because
can they bear a child? Can they give birth?
See, and I agree. I'm not disagree. I'm just trying to explain they don't think that bearing children biological. They don't think that the biological definition is adequate because it does not include all these other things that they're trying to get at. And I have read materials which I don't think are valid. This is the big struggle now in the academic realm, is to expose the pseudoscientific kinds of claims about how if you have high testosterone, that makes you a man, or whatever the kinds of things that they're pointed to other things as criteria for determining why men are men and why women are women.
They're basically basing it on feelings,
yes,
not facts.
They're trying to muddy the waters by not focusing on the reproductive system. So that's generally how biologists would define sex. And Colin Wright is the evolutionary biologist.
That's who I had the conversation with, was Colin. Yes.
So Colin is the major figure that I know but I've also heard Jerry Coyne and Luana Marola about this. It's the gametes that is the key issue here. So are you a sperm producer or are you an egg producer? And do you have a reproductive structure that supports the possible, because sometimes people are infertile, but you still have the reproductive structure that makes it like a male structure or a female structure that's involved in the the potential production of gametes, egg, or sperm. So that's very much the biological way of thinking about this. And all these other factors are really irrelevant. But what the many of these, sort of things that have been happening in the academic side is they bring in a whole bunch of other extraneous details to make everyone confused about it. And then it's sort of like, okay, well, since you can't really come up with a hard and fast, basis for your definition, that means that having this self-identified thing is more satisfactory. But they misrepresent the biology on it, which is there's no confusion about this. There has been intentional mudding of the waters by various, I'll call them postmodern academics, who try to say that we don't really understand biological sex. Like it's a very complicated thing.
So
It's
peculiar.
not complicated at all.
So they probably think that sex and gender are the same thing.
Yes. Or they certainly are interested in not distinguishing from them. And in fact, I've heard many people say gender doesn't even really make sense as a concept.
I'm sorry, but
it's a feeling.
Yeah. So they're probably the same people that think, like, if I sat here and said I feel like a cat, they would be like, "You're entitled to be a cat." And I don't
know how they get annoyed if you start bringing up those kinds of things, because they think,
well, that's the same thing.
And this is Mia Hughes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the author of the WPATH files, Mia Hughes.
Yes.
She's in her research, and this is something she's gone into in a lot more detail than me. When you look at the literature, it actually does think that they do sort of imply that there's such a thing as a gendered soul. So there's some essence that's inside of you that is different from biological kinds of considerations.
It sounds
and this
like
has kind of permeated everything.
Honestly, it sounds like witchcraft, hodgepodge. It sounds like people that go out in June and do these summer solstice dances and like witchcraft. I'm sorry. It's awesome that they can believe in that. They probably bring out the crystals and like all this other stuff, but I would call it delusional thinking. They're so welcome to think that. I'm not taking that away from them, but it's just not facts. It's not science. And it's like XX chromosomes, XY chromosomes, it's DNA. And again, again, it's like, I love hitting my head like this because it's like, I've had these conversations over and over again. And I'm not even like, I took grade 10, grade 11 biology and I'm good.
Yeah. I think it does come down. I think it comes down to the definition of woman. And once people conceded ground on the fact that woman is something different than an adult human female, then we went down this huge path. And because the people who are arguing that it's discrimination have a understanding of woman that is subjective and not objective based on biology, then they can claim that they're being discriminated against because they're not able to go into the women's kinds of areas, and they claim they're women, so they are being, according to their definition, being discriminated against. That's my take on the whole issue. But I think we just have to fight hard for these definitions to be objective, so we can say, no, it's a biological category. It's not anything to do with how you feel or your the soul that you think you possess or anything. That can't be verified at all by any kind of universal kind of way of looking at it.
I don't know how it got changed in the first place. Was it Bill C-16 that changed that?
It was in the universities, and that's why I'm so interested in the universities, because I've been in the universities now for, since the 80s. It started in the 60s, 1960s.
Who put it in there, Francis? Who put it in there?
The French philosophers, Michel Foucault and a bunch of others. That kind of was taken up in a very small way in universities in the 1960s. A whole bunch of activists got entrance into universities because of this. And then they gradually took over the machinery of the universities, starting in around, really came on strong in 2013. And that's when we see the terrible, terrible anti-scientific character of the universities now, where you can get fired if you say that there's only male and female. That is used, that happened to me. So that was a major case that was made by other faculty members, that because I only accept that there's male and female, I deny the humanity of trans people, and I am saying that they have no place in the university because of my academic position on this question. That's their view about it. And we're fighting hard. We're fighting hard to stop this from happening. And if we can get the people to understand what's gone wrong in the universities, people think the universities are these kind of esoteric places that, they just talk about stuff that has no effect on society.
Like gender studies classes?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, that's where it went wrong. It went wrong in the 60s. Yeah. That's when it all came in. But if we could
God bless you, Francis. God bless you. Have you met Jordan Peterson?
Yes, I have.
I feel like you guys would be you guys would be besties, I tell you.
Well, we're politically different. That's the interesting thing, because I'm a socialist and he's a conservative. Yeah. But at this point, I say to people, look, we are fighting for the right to have these conversations. Yeah. We don't know if we can't argue with, a conservative about the nature of biological sex, then we can never get to like the more political kinds of arguments. So we need to fight for the universities to be able to have these academic discussions. That can't happen now in universities because of these activists who have taken over the machinery of the institutions and claim that if you take this position, this scientific position, you are engaged in discrimination, hate, harassment, all these kinds of policies that are being weaponized against, people who are just, 10 years ago, this would have been a very odd conversation that people would be having. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So that's what's happening in my area of the world. But the final thing I wanted to ask you about, and this is something that's been raised to me, is that the first one was, why do you think that women are not out, like it's many times it's women who are fighting against you?
Yeah.
Who is that? That's an odd thing.
Well, you must know Tammy Peterson then. Jordan's. Yeah, I'm actually good friends with her. I've been on her podcast a couple times talking about this. She's really good. She loves talking about a lot of feminist issues, and it's odd to me, but the reason why women kind of defend, I guess, what they don't understand is they're actually defending men because, they are men, is because women are just by nature very nurturing creatures. So we're caregivers, and that's who we are.
So they think it's compassion. Yeah. So
compassionate.
That's a big problem, is using compassion to have these kind of somewhat psychopathic kinds of things that are happening. Because when it's told that if, in order to be a good person and to help people and so on, you've got to allow this man to beat up a bunch of women in this boxing match.
Yeah, but they're not looking at that way. I mean, like, how many women have we seen that are in abusive relationships that keep going back to the to the man? And sometimes they look at it as love too, right? But for me, I mean, I guess I think because of my rehab that I went to, and I think maybe I would have been differently if I was still using and drinking. I mean, when I was in my addiction, I had no self-love, I had no self-respect. So during my time in rehab and just working on myself, I have all the self-love and self-respect in the world. So I I just can't have that happen to me. I'm just not going to let a man come in and do that. I have a lot of integrity, and I've talked about this in a lot of my speeches. When I travel across Canada, I say, you know, my life consists of just speaking the truth, having integrity. And if I don't tell the truth, if I don't do this, then I could surely relapse. And Jordan Peterson gets this. I actually, because he's helped me a lot, even just what he talks about in life is that integrity is number one in my life. And if you lie to yourself, if you cheat every day, of course you're going to relapse and go back to drinking. Of course you will. Like if I cheated on my spouse every day or did bad things, that's just going to make me drink again, right? So the whole, like the women, I don't know if these women have integrity or have respect, but I mean, just women in general, I mean, they look at these men as like, oh, the poor guy. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just going to call a spade, is that these men going into these sports or this trans pandemic, it's mentally ill, narcissistic men that are going into these sports and to these spaces. And I'd say 80% or more are, have a fetish. They want to dominate. Why are they going in and wanting these prizes? Why are they going in there wanting to dominate? It's a mental disorder. It's a mental illness, and they want attention. It's a fetish. A lot of it's a sexual fetish, and these women are feeling sorry for these men. But guess what? It's almost like they're aiding and abetting them, but they're looking at it as compassion. So, yeah. And they're, and a lot of them are reaching out and looking at me as a bad person. But all around, what I'm doing is I'm actually trying to protect not only little girls and girls' safety, but I'm actually protecting women. So a lot of the ones that I don't get very much hate mail or any bad messages, but it's always the women are like, oh, how dare you? Like, I'm just like, what? I'm actually doing this to protect you. Like, women will actually write me and go, oh, I can't believe you're doing this. I'm like, I'm literally doing this to protect you and your little girls.
And so this is kind of a related question. In terms of your teammates or people in the powerlifting, the female powerlifting area, because I've often wondered the way to stop this, it seems to me, apart from just regulations, would be for women to come together and say, as a group, we're not going to compete in any of these things if there's a male that's going to be competing. Is that a possible thing to do? And why wouldn't that be possible to do that?
Well, I mean, it's a little hard with my federation. So you have men competing, which, I mean, the men don't care because they don't have that issue in my federation. But the other women in my group, so because there's different ages or different weight classes. In my weight class who had to compete against Anne, there was probably like 3 other women that probably would have, but they didn't actually have to compete against Anne, right? There was just me. I boycotted. I went to nationals. Anne was there. I stepped off the platform and I said, I refuse to compete, and I didn't show up. But there was other people there that didn't know that Anne was a man. So they just went up and competed. So with powerlifting, it's a little different. It's not like soccer where like the whole team doesn't show up and compete. With powerlifting, it's an individual sport.
Yeah.
So I did my own thing and I didn't show up. So it's a little different with powerlifting because it's just an individual thing. But I mean, people knew what happened to me within my sport. To me, people were thanking me behind the scenes. Everyone knew what I did. They thought it was great. They offered support. They stood behind me and all that. But they still continued to compete with this federation. Why? I don't know. They could have gone with a different federation. But to me, that just kind of goes to show like, hey, A, people just don't care. B, a lot of them are women. Sometimes women just are more compassionate. It doesn't mean they're showing support with Anne, but it's just like some people just want that gold medal. Like I could have gone back to compete and went on Team Canada again. But to me, my integrity and everything, like being outspoken and my advocacy means more to me than going back on Team Canada and getting a gold medal. I guess knowing that they still allow men competing at a local level, like that would be me going back and saying, oh, okay, that's cool. That's okay to have men competing at a local level,
Mm.
but international is, it doesn't make sense to me. So that's why I didn't go back. But so.
Yeah, but it just seems to me that if we could just kind of convince the women, not that it should be like, it's kind of tragic that the governing bodies that should be protecting the viability of the sport and so on aren't doing it.
Yeah.
But if all the people competing, all the women, if we were able to get a situation where all the women would stand together, because if you just do it
Yeah.
yourself, it's like there's no big deal because it's just one fewer person who's not going to be competing. But if all the
Yeah.
women said, we're not going to do this, then the sport would be seriously in trouble because there would be no
Yeah.
one really in the who would be competing. But it's just
Well,
kind of the difficulties of getting everyone on the same page.
it's like, I said to you today on email, and like, what, since I've spoken out, sure, the suspension sucked. I was shocked by it. But you know what? It was the best thing that happened to me because you know what? I got worldwide recognition. If anything, I got 3 sponsors. I'm working with XXXY Athletics. I'm working with a supplement company. I keep getting sponsors. I was on Tucker Carlson. I was on Pierce Morgan. I'm meeting people. I'm doing interviews. I've got my own athletic brand. I've had like 99% support from around the world. I've had so much love.
Mm-hmm.
I can't walk down the street without someone coming up to me and saying, "Hey, are you April Hutchinson? Thank you so much. My daughters, thank you for
Yeah.
standing up." Like, I think that's the best message ever is when a father actually says, "Thank you so much for everything you do for my daughters."
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what? That's why I'm fighting. It's not so much for me. Hey, I'm just an old I'm in my 40s now. I have 2 little nieces that I want, they're 6 years old. I want them to have fair sports and safe locker rooms.
Yeah.
I don't fight just for sports. I fight for, men from out of our prisons, men from out of our washrooms. Let's keep puberty blockers away from little kids. I'm big on that. I'm like a women's rights activist, right? I'm all areas. So, I mean, I'm busy with that. So,
Yeah. So you're connected into society, deeper into society on this issue than me. Is it coming to an end?
well, you know what? I definitely see things turning around. And we have an election here in Ontario. And I mean, if the Conservatives don't win, well, no, we have a federal election coming up. If the Conservatives don't win, we're in big trouble because I do see the Liberals are going to double down, and especially with Carney. I mean, I don't know what your preference is, but
I'm on the
um,
line. I'm on the line.
yeah.
I
Well,
can't. It's very hard for me because I'm a socialist, but I
yes,
cannot take the woke stuff. I just, if anyone is doing anything on this, affirming identities of
yeah, and
people
that's
and
why,
putting on
Francis. That's
signs.
why I've said it time and time again. If I don't research, like the one thing I keep saying, I'm going to make a t-shirt that says it, and it's policy 102, policy number 102. Linda Blade was there when they passed it at the Conservative convention. She's the
Mm,
one that actually read it out loud in front of everyone,
mm,
and that is Pierre Poilievre on the other Conservative platform is keep men out of women's sports and spaces. And that's the one that I am holding true on my heart, and that I hope to God if the Conservatives win, because in my city alone, and I live in Little London, Ontario, we have men staying in the shelters with women. We have them in our federal prisons. We have them in our sports, as we know. We have them in our bathrooms. And, we need to have the definition of women back. We need to have our pride. We need to have our
mm,
everything back and our safety. And it's just demoralizing. It's disgusting what's happened. And I mean, for that alone, I mean, I'm definitely going to be voting Conservative because it is the only party. I mean, the People's Party is not going to win anyways. So please, people, don't throw your vote away on the People's Party.
yeah.
Please don't
Well, it's
split the
hard.
vote.
It's a hard world to live in these days because I can't I couldn't vote conservative because I just don't like it's. I'm just, although I just totally am on board with if we could get the women, adult human female, get all the men out of the women's space, this would be fantastic. But you've got all these other policies that are not related to that you've got to deal with. That's the problem for me. And I can't, to be honest, it's highly unlikely that I'll vote because I can't stomach anything, all of it. Because I got to go accept the woke stuff if and I know that's just irresponsible to some extent, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I can't take all these policies about, trans stuff and everything, but I can't take, sort of because I'm a socialist, so I can't take the free market kind of, approach and all this kind of, whatever it may be. So I think my only hope is to try and change society, which then will change the politics. Like if we could just get, and the universities is my kind of area, to get open discussion about trans activism, all these other things in universities. And you don't have to agree, whatever. It's just the idea that, you shouldn't have restrictions on what you can talk about in a university. This means it's not a university anymore. And so what I do now is I do what's called Spectrum Street epistemology, which is going into the universities, sort of like the Billboard Chris kind of, with that's like just to have the discussions and get the, get the universities to at least have people talking about these contentious topics. And then when the taboo is broken and the fear is broken a little bit, then you can have people say, oh, okay, well, of course I got fired for my positions, but if you have people standing up and talking in the street epistemology stuff, then they'll say, oh, well, they were able to say these things. And, here we are having this discussion. It's happening, and we're still here. We're not being, arrested in the middle of the night and all the other horrors that could potentially happen if we don't push back against this menace right now. So that's kind of how I see it, is that I think there's a lot of social problems in society that we really need to work on to say people, look, free speech is not a right-wing issue or anything. It's about the ability for us to try to figure out what's true. And if we can't do that, we're doomed. We're doomed as a society.
Well, the universities are brainwashing these poor kids. Let alone this gender studies class should be abolished and not even offered. I mean, I know people taking this class and it's just like, so now where is the free speech? Because they're literally going in and brainwashing these kids to exactly think what you just said right there, that a woman is anyone you identify as one. Yep. Are you kidding me?
Yep.
That is the most absurd sentence I've ever heard. Whenever I hear that sentence, I'd say 90% of people cringe when they hear that. They're like, it's just like, that's fairy dust. That's just like, that's why you see a lot of trans identifying individuals are addicted to anime. You see all the anime stuff is because it's make-believe, because it's like, it's a make-believe world. It's just, I can't believe it. And I know people taking gender studies, and it's just, and I'm like, I can't believe it's complete brainwashing.
Yeah. Well, that was the beginning in the 1960s. It all happened. Anyway, so April, just before we close, is there things that you think that you wanted to say that you were not able to say in this interview?
No, I think that's all. I think I told you what was going on with the Federation, because right now I'm just continuing to basically travel across. And like I said, since I've spoken up, which was a couple of years ago, it's really just been very positive. Like I said, I've gained sponsorships through it. I've had very little, besides the couple of trans activists trying to get me fired, which didn't work. And this and that, I've had a lot of support. So I would actually, if anyone does, I don't know when this comes out or what you're doing with this, but if I could offer any advice to anyone that is thinking about using their voice, I would really highly suggest not to be afraid to actually come out and actually be outspoken, because, I mean, I walk around, I wear this, I wear it to the local farmers market, I get high fives. I mean, I wear it to the wokest markets in my city, and the vendors were like, yeah, good job. I wore it to Victoria, BC, which is a super woke city in BC. I get old people clapping. You're going to ask me, are things changing? Yes, things are changing. I do believe there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I do think things are going to, I mean, every day or every week, every couple of months, I do see changes.
Mm.
I mean, maybe it's the algorithms I follow, but people are sick of this gender ideology.
Yep.
People are done with it.
Mm.
So,
Yep.
I mean, I do see positive changes, and I would just say keep speaking up if you want changes and challenge policies. I have challenged so many policies since I've started my fight, which is small little corporate ones to my sporting ones, and I've made changes. So I tell people, don't be afraid to challenge these policies.
And for people who want to follow what you do, find out what you're up to, what would you recommend? Where would you recommend that they look?
Probably my website's the number one place, which is www.aprilhutchinson.com. And that basically has all my media interviews, and it has my store. So if people want to buy a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, I mean, I have mugs and stickers and all that great stuff. If you don't want to speak out loud, then you can be a walking billboard, just like Billboard Chris, and just wear it.
Fantastic. Okay,
Yeah.
April. Well, as I mentioned, this interview will be posted on my YouTube channel in its entirety. And then the documentary, because I'm working on another issue right now. I've got some. I just it's a matter of getting the interviews done and the footage. So that's probably going to be a few months away getting the documentary done. But this interview will be available almost immediately.
Okay, great.
So thank
Okay.
you so much for agreeing to participate in this interview. I think it will be very informative for many people who are trying to understand the impact of trans activism on various aspects of society.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for everything you do. It was an
Thank you.
honor.
Okay, bye bye.